Good morning. Good morning to day 8 of our 100 days of community. I am very excited to be here, and we made it through the week. Um, I'm loving this. I'm loving this so much. So today is day 8 of our 100 days of community. Good morning, Tiffany. Hi, Marie. And today we're going to talk about the role of ancestral wisdom in community building, right? All right, I'm going to try to keep this out of my eyeballs because then you could see like the blue light from my screen, and that's bothersome to me. All right, so every day we start off and we come together with these 3 points and 3 takeaways that we should have. I'm so sorry, guys. This cold is working my soul and therefore my brain. So the brain fog, the voice, it throws me off when I hear myself out loud. So be gentle with me. I appreciate you. So, point 1, ancestral wisdom is a guide for liberation. Takeaway 2, or point 2, healing disconnection through ancestral wisdom. 3, ancestral wisdom as a tool for co creation. So, if you follow me or if you read anything, I have a series, like the patriarchy in pink for me is what white feminism is. I went through allyship and broke it down on why I don't believe in allyship and why we need to move into something that I call co creation, right? Because that's what we are. Like right now, what we are doing is we are co creating the world that we want to exist in because it was co created by these other people. So now we are doing counterculture work and co creating something new. So let's go back up to the top. Ancestral wisdom as a guide for liberation. Ancestral work activates white bodied people here in America. And that's for a few reasons. One, everybody here equates themselves with ancestors who were enslavers or, violators of treaties, which is valid. Many probably were not enslavers, realistically, just speaking numbers. But what you have to remember is that enslavement of Africans was an economy. So everybody benefited from a slave economy. The same thing as of today, right? I'm sitting on an iPhone and it is at the slave labor of children in the Congo. That is the reality, right? So somewhere down the line, I cannot turn around and say I was not complicit in slavery that's happening elsewhere. Here in America, it was very prevalent. Everything ran. The economy ran on the enslavement of Africans. So whether your family was an enslaver or not, they still benefited from enslavement very directly from here because this was a burgeoning society. It was new. It had nothing. Most of the crops that made America rich literally came over with Africans in their hair. I remind them of this during New Year's. Anyhow, another topic for another day. All of that being said, you guys are not new every generation. So we don't have to just be thinking of these most immediate people. We have to think about them when we're talking about accountability, when we're talking about repair work, when we're talking about community building. But when we're talking about ancestral work, our lines and our lineage is ever going. It is ever, ever going. When I do ancestral veneration, which I offer usually in October during Samhain, um, I remind white people, I'm like, listen, if you don't want to deal with the people, right? You're afraid to work with your lineage. Water is our eldest ancestor, right? Because that's another thing that supremacy culture disconnects us from is the land. Not only physically removing us, like we see globally, where you will remove the indigenous people from their lands, but quite literally a disconnect for we believe that we overlord over it instead of we are connected to it. So that could be where you even begin that work. I like to share a little story. Is one time the kids were outside playing and I get a pool every year, right? Like so they can go in the backyard and have a little good time or whatever. But they were just like splashing in the water, and it's just like going over, going over. And my husband at the time, their dad, was like, "Hey man, you know you wasting water," because they talks. Hey man, y'all wasting water, stop wasting the water. And it was in that moment I sat and thought, and I'm like, are they wasting the water or are they using the water? How are we thinking about this, right? And they were wasting the water because we're being charged for filtration of water. We're being charged for the containment of water. But this water has been the same water that's been here ever since the beginning of time. It is going back into the ground. It will be soaked up into the sky and come back down as rainfall. What we are actually paying for and why we think of it as a waste is because we are thinking about it from the lens of capitalism and the containment of it. So when you're talking about ancestral work, and if you don't want to deal with the direct people until you kind of get more comfortable with it, you could even begin there with the sacredness that is water, and then, start working towards things that are here to preserve your eldest ancestor because we need water, right? So, all of that, what I had turned around and said was our ancestors built and sustained communities that thrived through interdependence. When you think about our ancestors, right? I'm a Black American, right? United States American. So I think about my ancestors. My grandmother is from the Gullah Geechee area in South Carolina. And they have a very specific Black culture in the United States. And it is one of the ones that are held most closest to that of their West African family members that were brought over here. And when you think about how any immigrant um, communities thrive, it is through interdependence, right? And what has happened with white bodied people in America is you've lost that connection to your ancestors, to your ancestral home, to your ancestral people, right? Like it's fun to turn around and be like, but I'm Italian. Oh, okay. What does that mean to you though, right? Like where's the resilience of your people? Or I'm Irish. Okay, green. Like only on St. Patty's Day? Only when you're getting drunk? Only when what? When are you Irish? Are you Irish every single day? Are you showing up in that in your life? Does it show through your practices, through how you treat other people? Is it showing up? Is your lineage of being X showing up in some sort of way? Is your ancestral wisdom, knowledge, your epigenetic knowledge showing up in you being that? Or are you just trying to find a separation from being white? Because I'm Irish too. So what conversation are we having right now, right? So when you start thinking about it from that point of view, as somebody who comes from New York City, very privy to watching immigrants come here and create their own neighborhoods. Like quite literally, when you're in New York City, it's not separated like it is. Like coming to the South was a huge culture shock for me because it's very color line, right? Black, white, done. There's no more richness to it. There's no more robustness to it. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Where when you're in New York City, like you can go to an Albanian neighborhood, Yugoslavian, German, Polish, Irish, Italian, Dominican, Jamaican, Guyanese, like these areas, these pockets are very distinct, right? So like that there's a difference. That there's no monolith that's being created within these neighborhoods, right? And now that's not to say, again, remember, systemic, interpersonal. So these people are still white people if they're white bodied systemically. But when you are inside of this small area and this town, you could see the interdependence that they thrive on, the economies that they build. These are those parallel systems that I'm talking about in community building, right? So when we look to our ancestors and how they all survived some level of violence or colonization, you see it as a blueprint, right, for dismantling these systems. Many people practice resource sharing, collective decision making, and that is how we can build those same systems, right? And again, it goes back to doing it in our home. Are you guys sharing decision making at home, or do you have a hierarchy there? Is everything left up to, the husband in your home? Are you living in a patriarchal hierarchy and all decisions go through him? That's paternalism in those 15 pillars of supremacy culture. Are you guys collectively making choices for what's best for the family? We think as adults, and that's that adult hierarchy over children, that childism, that we're making the best decisions. And while, yes, we may have some more experience time and we can have more forethought and the brain development to think about what these decisions will make, it still would be beneficial to involve your children and the rest of your family in those decisions. Because one, it helps them learn how to make their own decisions. It teaches them community building practices, right? That this is communal. Every single choice impacts every single person that is involved. Now, it may not mean that it's going to change anything, right? Like, oh, okay, we could have a conversation about bedtime and everybody's like, we don't want to go to bed till 2 o'clock in the morning. Oh, I hear you. That's probably not the best choice to make because X, Y, and Z. But see how they could be a part of the conversation. And to be fair, one time I let them make that choice. I was like, you know what? As long as you get up and go to school and you're not going to be assholes, that's cool. You can do that. And they did that. And that lasted for about a week before they were like, oh my God, I can't. My body is breaking down. And I'm like, lesson learned, but they were a part of that decision for themselves in their home. So that is part of how we could look towards ancestral wisdom to guide us in our community building and liberation efforts. To look at that blueprint of how did they make decisions in a community? Did they all come together? Was there one dictator? No, they came together. They worked together interdependently. That's super important. Point two, healing disconnection through ancestral knowledge. Supremacy culture thrives on disconnection, both from ourselves and our heritage. Reclaiming ancestral wisdom allows us to heal those fractures, reconnecting us to a lineage of resilience and resistance. And personally, I think that that's so beautiful. And I tell people, if you talk to me for 5 minutes, you're going to know two things. I'm from the Bronx and I'm Irish. And it's because I'm proud of both of those things and the resilience of both of those places, right? There's a regional pride that I have, the Bronx, very specifically the South Bronx, where I'm from. You know, when I was growing up, it was a victim of white flight and it was called The Burn Down Bronx. You could look up an old movie called Fort Apache. I think Paul Newman was in it. It's really good. And the police wouldn't even come into our neighborhood because it was just so violent and overrun. You know, poverty breeds violence. So that's how that goes, right? But in that, during those times, you had things like guardian angels, right? Like the police don't want to come in, that's fine. They put on their little red berets, you know, they started policing the neighborhoods and governing things. If something was wrong, they were on train stations, making sure things were good. Did they have their issues? Yes. But this is how you could see how communities can come together even when systems don't want to be involved. Like, good, stay out of our neighborhood. We're fine with that. We'll deal with it. So it's going to depend on the lens that you're using. So when I think about what the Bronx as a region has gone through and what we built and what we created and how many people came out of there, more creative, more loving, more community oriented, there's a pride in that. There's something beautiful about that. And that is even ancestral knowledge, right? Of your region, of your area. What do you know about what that land went through? Because again, we are connected to that. We are a part of that. And that's just my experience with it. I couldn't even tell you the experience of the indigenous people of that area, right? Of the Bronx. Like what did that land go through with them? That knowledge that's given to the lands is then given to the people. Then when you talk about your own heritage, like I say, like, so I'm Irish. I say that because it's like, yeah, if it were up to the Brits, we wouldn't exist. There's a beautiful knowledge and resilience in that. And many Europeans, most all, like who went through a violent chapter in their history of colonization and Christianization. Like, let's be very clear. What we know to be colonization today is yesterday's Christianization. Coming through European towns and telling them that they were savages, that they were animals, that they were pagans, and none of that is good. And you worship this new God that we've created, and it's one God and no other, and you have no options, so we'll burn your hometown down. That's a violent forced assimilation, right? And That's a terrible co-opting of a religion that was being born small and tiny. Had a whole series on that. Once it paired with the empire, it became a tool of violence and colonization. So when you heal that disconnect of who you are, where you come from, because we're all indigenous to somewhere. I notice with social justice movements, new words or new language, and I don't even want to say new, but like language often is then reintroduced, or the masses now have access to this language, or sometimes new language is developed in these movements. And so when we hear indigenous, we automatically think about the indigenous people here in Turtle Island, right? And I'm like, that's a global term. We're all indigenous to somewhere, right? We all originated from somewhere, and not in the ownership sort of way, but in the way that there is a connection to land that you come from. Often I tell people to trace the lineage of their mother, because that's the womb you came from. The womb you came from goes all the way back to the womb of the earth that bore us all, right? Healing that disconnect and learning the history of your people, of your lands, and what they went through and how they moved through should empower you to recognize that you're still here. You are a part of that lineage, and you have the knowledge within you. The same way we carry epigenetic trauma, I want us to think about we carry epigenetic joy, we carry epigenetic resilience, knowledge, awareness, community building skills. My goal is just here to awaken you to what you already should know that's inside of you. It's already there, because all of us have suffered at one point in time under the violence of oppression, and we're still here. We are still here. And that resilience and learning about what your people went through will activate in you and help you be in community in a different sort of way. Pardon me. 3, ancestral wisdom as a tool for co creation. Liberation is not about returning to the past, right? Because often people hear that and they're like, okay, well, I'm going to go and learn all the things and like use it as another form of disconnection, right? Like, okay, I'm going to disconnect from, you're still white, you're still white, you're still white, you're still white. Okay. This is not that. This is not an excuse to no longer be white. This is not an excuse to find any and all marginalizations to stop, because all of those could be accurate and multiple truths exist at the same time. Here's the one main truth in a white supremacist society: your race is your very first marginalization, and you could have plenty of intersecting identities. That is true also. But white is your first one. So these are not tools to separate you from that. What it is tools to reconnect you to what you were, right? One of the popular questions that I got kind of like TikTok famous for was, I asked the question, who were you before you were white? And that is the question that you need to ask yourself when you're looking at ancestral wisdom for this tool of co creation and moving through this step of community building. Who was I before I was white? Sitting with that question. What does that mean? What did it take to become white? Who did it harm to become white? Myself and other people included, right? Because you have to, again, this work is personal. So you're going to have to include yourself in your own liberation and deconstruction work. Who did it harm for you becoming white? Aside from all of the other non white people in the world, you, your own lineage, your own disconnect from your ancestors, your people, and your land. So, again, let me recap that. Liberation is not about returning to the past, but about integrating ancestral practices with new ideas to create systems that serve everyone. By honoring ancestral knowledge while adapting it into modern contexts, we create a powerful foundation for co creating liberated spaces. So, as an example, I said incorporate ancestral practices like communal meals or restorative circles into modern community spaces to foster trust and healing. Often with the white witch movement, what we see is like the spiritual bypassing, right? Like everybody's a witch now, grab a candle and do some spells. They'll turn around and try to work with hoodoo and do all this stuff. And they're like, oh, that's not a closed practice. One, that's another colonizer mindset. Practices don't have to be closed just because you need to have a ceremony or something. Some things are tied to ancestral work, like hoodoo. It's quite literally the induction is being a descendant of the enslaved. So if you are doing magic, right, which is a very huge thing right now, which I'm super thankful that people are touching back into that part of their lives and creating, new earth. Um, but if you are using ancestral magic and it's not your ancestral magic, whose ancestors are you tapping into? If you're not connected to your own history, your own your own lineage, your own practices, your own truth. Whose energy are you tapping into? Your own? So for me, it's just a replacement for Christianity and repeating Christianity, but calling it spirituality, right? It is literally, you guys are placing rules on it, and not everybody's magic or spiritual practices are the same. That is that learning. And it can't just be spells, right? Magic happens. This is magic. What we are doing right now, 5 people, 10 people, 1,000 people. This, this is communing. This is creating something. This is alchemy. This, right? It doesn't have to be, let me go do some more capitalistic shit. Let me go buy a $50 fucking candle. It could quite literally be going to the dollar store, right? I used to have a segment on Dollar Tree Magic. It could be going to the dollar store, grabbing a box of candles, lighting it at your table, and having a conversation with friends, right? And invoking whatever energy you need to come into that space right now. That's magic, right? Turning around and saying, you know what? I am going to do a community dinner in my backyard. That's magic. Feeding people, stirring with intention, bringing people together is magic. That is what our ancestors knew. Think about perpetual stew. Is it born out of poverty? Yes. Does it feed multitudes? Also, yes. Personally, I will still throw a crock pot on my counter and make some perpetual stew. What the hell is in this fridge? Throw it, and I leave that crock pot on low for days and just adding more shit to it. That's alchemy. That is taking something and shifting it and changing it into another. So when we do these communal practices, when we are learning and reconnecting to that, I want us to look beyond, I have all of the tools. I have all of the tools, all of the tools. But I want us to look beyond cards and tarot and all of those things. I want us to turn around and look at how did they survive together? How did they welcome in refugees from other towns, areas, right? Like if you were a druid, would you let an Irishman in? Because all of you were under attack from the same crown that was trying to kill you guys. That's there, right? It's in there. It shows you how they gathered, how they came together, how they made something from nothing. We're all alchemists. We're all divine. We're all communal people. And that is the ancestral memory that you need to be taking with you when you bring ancestral wisdom into community building. Hold on. Laura says, I don't want to do the bypassing of other cultures magic like hoodoo, for example, but I do want to do what is okay for me to do because I saw a certain spell I felt I needed to do. Okay, okay. I don't I'm not entirely sure what feedback you're seeking right now. If you want to clarify that, I'm, if you're even asking for assistance or guidance, let me know. All of that being said, that is, sometimes it feels like sometimes when you touch on the subject, it feels a little too woo for people. Like, oh, I didn't come here for that. I wanted some very practical, type A brain thinking skills. And yes, but that's not whole self integration, right? And community building and decolonization is that we are spiritual. We may not be religious, but we are we're divine. Think about we're sitting here talking. How is that happening? How is your heart beating? What? That is divinity, whatever you want to call it, by whatever name, whatever means. And as long as you are not forcing your beliefs onto another person, you are fine. But we are spiritual, we are divine, and you cannot separate that from the human, right? And that is part of supremacy culture. Again, I want us to think that supremacy culture is created to disconnect us from everything, from ourselves, from our spirituality, from our divinity, from our access to things. What supremacy culture creates is an intercessory. When it created Christianity, it created an intercessory. All of a sudden, you need a priest to talk to God. So I can't just sit here and commune with nature. I can't just sit out here and talk with the birds and sit with the trees and we're communing. I can't just touch the ground and trust myself and hear the things, the waves of the water. None of that matters now. Now, all of a sudden, I need to step into a building and go talk to a person that's supposedly anointed and has a deeper connection with the divine than me. That's weird to me. That just doesn't make any sense. So, though it may feel woo and though it may feel uncomfortable, I'm not telling anybody um, how to live their life spiritually. I am telling you and declaring you are a divine being. You are a part of nature. And that is just fucking amazing. When you really start looking around, like I'm looking out my window now and just like, I'm a part of that tree, that rock, this grass, that dirt, this water, this air, these clouds. If you can't see your own divinity in that, I hope you do. That's what I hope. I wish you do. And in doing so, remembering there's a reclamation that needs to happen of your own ancestral wisdom. Because these people were aware of that. There's not a group of people that did not commune in such a way, that did not come together to break bread, to share drinks, share stories, right? Like our most of our for human history has been verbal. Again, supremacy culture recognizing that it disconnects things, and one of those pillars of supremacy culture being worship of the written word is it came and severed that too. All of a sudden your storytelling doesn't matter and what you're saying is not true, and if it's not written down it does not matter, and that's crazy, right? That is just, that's a terrible concept, because what it does is it leaves us right where we are, right? You're saying things like, oh, that's not true because I didn't learn it in a history book, and it's like, okay, so if I go, right, again, macro micro, if I go and I decide to take somebody from this audience, right? Tiffany. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna go research Tiffany's life. I'm gonna write a book. She didn't write a book about her story. I'm gonna write a book about it, and I'm going to go and I'm gonna go teach that story of Tiffany and their family, because I'm not sure the pronouns, and their family. Does it make it true? Do I know anything about Tiffany aside from what I want to tell? Right? So that is where the danger of worship of the written word can come into. So much has been lost to history, or better yet, disregarded, because many of us still have our stories. Many of us know these things to be true. And it just needs to be integrated within, right? Other people, if you care to listen to other people, their lived experiences are, we're storytellers. Again, our lives are meant to be witnessed. I often talk about my own self because I'm going to use me as my own best example. And I don't want a damn person telling my story. I could tell my own. They should tell theirs, right? So these things are part of our own ancestral wisdom and our awareness that comes in. So again, sorry, top of the hour there. So one, ancestral wisdom as a guide for liberation. Two, healing that disconnection through ancestral wisdom. I mean, ancestral knowledge. Three, ancestral wisdom as a tool for co creation. And yesterday, I gave you guys a little bit of a homework, right? Because we were talking about stating your, I told you, state your need and let somebody take care of you, right? Because we were talking about collective care. Another bit of homework is I would like you to think about that. If you know where you came from, Google it. How did these people survive X, Y, and Z? Whatever atrocity, because there's enough fucking atrocity in human history to go around. How do they survive? And just recognizing and leaning into the strength that you are a part of that lineage and you're still here. That's beautiful. That's fucking divine. You're still here. And more so, you're showing up every day to do the work. How much more beautiful is that? How beautiful are you continuing that legacy of resilience, right? That legacy, that desire to be in community. That's yummy. Yummy, yummy, yummy. So I'm going to jump off of here and I will be back tomorrow. And I'm super thankful that you guys showed up today. And I know this is a bit, sometimes it's a little bit of an uncomfortable part because, again, it's grappling with the way our minds have been programmed for Christianity and witchcraft and oddness and all of that. But sit with it. Just sit with it and move beyond the idea of magic and think about the resilience you are. You exist here because people thousands of years ago did not give up, and they're still here. Thank you, Lindsay. You take care of yourself too. I'm going to try to nurture this cold because it's killing me for live conversation. And I'm going to be here. The article will come out with the replay. And again, every single day, 9:30 in the morning. Replay comes out in the afternoon, no later than the evening. First 10 days free. After that, for paid subscribers only. I wanted to ask you guys, and it'll be in a survey in here. When it moves to paid subscribers, would you prefer doing it here or on Zoom? So that's already will be in there. So please answer. And if you cannot afford it, please do not hesitate to email me scholarships at Desiree B. Stevens, and that's with a PH.com, and I'll comp you for the year. No questions asked. Yes, Tammy, we are resilient. Take that with you all day. And when it feels heavy, we are resilient. And just remind yourself of that. See you tomorrow. Bye.